Ooh, that looks tasty.
Welcome folks, today the Hungry Gamer is back with another game review, and today we're talking about Tidal Blades 2, Rise of the Unfolders. And before I get started, thank you to Druid City Games for sending me this copy of the game so I can make this video. And I will also point out that they actually did send me the deluxe upgrades. Most of what you're going to see out here is the retail edition, though there are a few things that you'll see that are not. These components here, these little squishy fruits, and these shells are 3D and plastic. And there are also minis that you can get that come pre-washed. And I'll zoom in a bit so you can kind of see them a little. And here we go, here's a couple of them. I'll just say that they do have a pretty darn good detail, and pre-washed is always good. And there's different colors for kind of bosses and heroes, and I guess the mooks we'll call them. And I'll probably show you these again when I do my final thoughts. But because I tend to shoot top down, when you have a mini like this, it's kind of hard to see anything. So it's a little bit easier to see with the standees, though even the standees are kind of filling up the entire space that they are. Now, with that said, what this game is this is the sequel to Druid City and Skybound Games' Tidal Blades. And you might have heard that I put the word sequel kind of in quotations, if you could hear that. Because Tidal Blades was not an adventure dungeon crawl game, and this very much is an adventure dungeon crawl game. Though you're using, I guess, the heroes from the previous game as well. And now you're actually going to kind of go do the adventure and all of that. And to do that, you're going to be going through an adventure book with a bunch of different scenarios, and you'll be playing it through on these map books. As you see, I have two map books here, and you kind of put them both together, and you get your board. And you'll be using a dice chucking and I'm going to call it tile placement, though they're actually cards, not tiles, in order to do all of that. Now, with that said, if you are not interested in how this game is played, so we'll jump into my final thoughts, then when you go to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk about how this game is played. And this is minimal spoilers. What you are seeing is kind of the end result of the first scenario, which is as close as you're going to get to a tutorial scenario. So there's some minor spoilers here. I'm not going to go into how it works really, but just so I can kind of play out some of the things that are happening here, this is what I have set up. Now, what's going to happen is each round you are going to adjust your initiative. And the way that's going to work is each of the different bad guys, you'll see right here we have some tentacles here, and we have some coral bugs right here. And the way it's going to work is you'll have your initiative, which will have been determined throughout the game, throughout the various rounds you've been playing that will be adjusting, and everything has a base initiative. But what will happen is all the bad guys will have their AI card, and it'll tell you if they're going to go up or down on the initiative. In this case, they're going to go down. Well, and in this case here, the coral bugs are also going to go down. They'll go down too. Then each of your heroes are going to get to, in private, pick their own card that they're going to play. And it might be something like this one right here, which will give you a +2. You might have an option of going up or down, or it might be a card like this that has no change whatsoever. And then just for the sake of argument, we're going to say we're going to pick this one right here that's a +2, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in just a moment. But that would send 1 and 2. And since I've just come up to the same level, I would show up on that side right there. And then for the other hero, we will just assume that we're going to do this one right here, which does nothing as far as a change in initiative goes. Then you'll go down the initiative track, top to bottom, left to right, and each of the heroes are going to act. Now, a lot of different things can happen on the cards, but the core of what's going to happen, and I'm going to show you exactly how it works in just a moment, is you'll be moving yourself around the board, or this hero, I should say, and you'll be mostly attacking bad guys. There are other things that are going to happen that you're going to be able to unlock later in the game, new powers, new abilities. Again, I'm not going to talk about any of those because I don't want to spoil anything. And then you'll wind up making an attack on the bad guys. And you're usually going to roll anywhere between 1 and 3 dice, though occasionally you'll have more than that. But in general, 1 to 3 are what most of the attacks are going to do. So then you'll roll your attack, which are these d6s here, and now I have rolled that there. And what we're looking at is, these reds are hits. So I've hit this tentacle right here, and I happen to know that these tentacles have 7 hit points because of their little AI card that they have. And it's the purple one, so I would move this all the way up to here. And you can see this is how you kind of track enemies' health. You'll have multiple of these boards, and you track enemies' health based on the different color of the standee. And for the miniatures, they have bases. You'll see 2. He's number 2, and we have it right here. And he's at 7 health. And I'm going to leave that off the board for the rest of this video. But so I've done 2 damage. Then you'll see this symbol right here. And what that means is I can spend focus, and you'll see how that's tracked in just a moment, but I could spend 1 focus to make that focus symbol a hit. So I could spend that, and now I've done 3 damage. If, say, I'd rolled this, I could spend 1 focus to make this die 2 damage, and another focus to make that 2 damage, and then have 4. You get the idea. And then there is this kind of tide symbol, which for the most part means you missed. As you go through the game, as you get different abilities, sometimes that symbol will mean something else, but that's going to change scenario to scenario. And with luck, you're going to kill the things that you're attacking. When the bad guys go, it's a little bit simpler. So we're going to just take this tentacle card right here, and when they get to go, you'll see all of them are going to do 3 damage at a range of 3. This symbol down here means if you attack someone right next to you with this ranged attack, you don't take any disadvantages. But you're going to do 3 damage. Then you're going to add to that this D8 here. And I've rolled that, and I got the little tide symbol, and nothing happens. Then you'll see down here, there's extra effects that can happen, and that's going to change depending on what the actual card says. Now, in addition, you'll notice that this little coral bug here has this M on it, which for the standee would go like this on top, and there's other ways to notate that with the miniatures. What that means is it is a mutant, a particularly dangerous baddie, and you would roll this yellow die instead, which is just a little bit more dangerous. And that's actually kind of the core of how combat works. What I have not told you is the core of kind of how the heroes work on their player board. And so this is what a player board might look like. And this is kind of a mid-game setup that I have here. So over here is where you're going to track your stats. And these white spots here are kind of marking kind of the maximum level you can get to, so I can't increase this stat beyond 2. You'll also see you kind of have 3 layers of health. Every time your health goes down 1, you're going to take a wound card, which is kind of going to clog up your deck and be annoying later on. And it's also going to tell you here what you're able to spend these stats on. Now you also see we have this spot up here. These are kind of additional little powers that you're able to get, and you're going to be able to use your shells as you obtain them over there and right here as well, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But I do also want to point out that you'll notice there is space here, because what you're able to do is you're able to get kind of new power-ups that are going to go in there, and you'll be able to use those shells to activate these different powers. So at first I'm going to talk about how your cards work. And so what's going to happen is every time you play a card, and we'll just say I'm playing this one right here, what you're going to do is you're going to place it somewhere in the grid. And then after you've placed it, you're going to fire off the row or column that that new card is in. So by placing it here, I could fire off this or this. So if I go this way, what it's telling me is this one printed on the board means I can move 2 spaces, I'm going to get a shell, and I get to do a 2-die attack. And then because there's this chain symbol, they both have the chain, it means I can do this 2-die attack also. Each of those attacks is separate, so if I was next to 2 different bad guys, I could attack 2 different bad guys. Had I gone this way, I would actually be getting 2 of the spirit here, which I'm maxed out on, and I'd be able to add 1 extra die to this attack. Now, had I, say, gone here and completed this row, then at the end of the round, this row would actually clear all the way off, and I would have new things to do. And that would clear the board and kind of open up new combo opportunities. And so what's happening here is you're kind of managing your board, deciding when do you want to cover up these base abilities, when do you want to clear everything off of the board, so on and so forth. Now, I mentioned shells. As you get shells, in general, you're going to start by putting them down here into your shield. And what happens is, when you are hit, you are able to block 1 damage per shell in your shield. So if I got hit for 4 damage, well, I would take 1 damage, and then I discard 1 of these shells, and now if I get hit again, I'll have a 2 damage shield. at the very beginning of the round, any shells that are here are going to move over here to your Quantum Reserve, and you're going to be able to use those in order to activate whatever abilities that you have here. Then, when you get to the end of the game, you're going to get a certain amount of experience and a certain amount of fame, and you'll be tracking that on these pages here, and each one comes with a pad of a pretty good amount of paper, so I can't imagine actually running out. Now, as you do that, you'll be able to upgrade your trait levels, you'll be getting new skills, and the other thing here is you have these path advancements, and I didn't mention that yet, but each round you're going to have I'll call it a quest that you're doing, and if you accomplish the ability on either side, you're going to get rewarded with these different path points, and as you go up, you'll see you'll be unlocking new ability cards to kind of upgrade your action deck. And then you'll go on to the next part of the storybook and you will move on. Obviously, there are lots of different things that are going to happen. For example, there's these little guys here. I didn't mention them at all because that's a little bit more of a spoiler than I want to give for the very first scenario. They're there, these little citizens, and there's things you have to do to try to keep them safe or move them around or get them killed or do whatever. I'm not going to spoil it, but, well, I guess I did. It's one of those three things. But that's a very high-level overview of how this game works. So, what do I like about this game? The first thing is, as with pretty much all of Druid City's crowdfunded games, it's a really nice production. And it's a really nice production whether you are thinking about just the basic retail edition or if you're talking about it with the upgraded bits, which includes minis and deluxe components. I will say the deluxe bits, the shells and the fruit, those are great. I love those. I really do. The minis also are really good looking. They are, well, done. They are really good looking minis, and I really appreciate what they've done in having them be different colors. The heroes are washed, so if you feel like you don't want to paint, that's fine. They don't feel just like plain plastic. The minions are washed, and the bosses are washed, and you have different colors throughout, so it actually does look nice on the board, even if you haven't painted anything. That said, the standees look really good too. So just all around, this is a really nice production, whichever version you happen to have. There's also some like kind of dual layered boards that are there, and I just think all of that is really, really cool. A special shout out for the way the map works. And in the brief thing that I showed at the beginning, you saw there's kind of two books to kind of push together, and you kind of flip through the books like a book. But what is really cool, and is just a really well thought out thing, is for the one book on my left as you go through, and eventually it doesn't, I don't know that it will work out all the way through the entire game, but as the left book, you flip it like a normal book. The right book, you start at the back and you flip it reverse so it always lines up perfectly. Very clever. Even to the point to where sometimes there's a third little map board that you have to bring in. It has a little spacer that you get to put under there so it will also match up if things are flipped out a certain way. Really think that is a bit of clever production that I have never seen before, and I think that's just very, very cool. But moving into the game itself, this is one of those, I'm going to call it a lighter dungeon crawl. I put this in the same realm as Wander, Cult of Barnacle Bay, as Tales from the Red Dragon Inn, as Kinfire Chronicles, kind of in. And then over here you have things like Madara, Dungeon Universalis, League of Dungeoneers, those really crunchy, heavy, millions of rules things. No, this is over here. This is in this realm. So that's kind of where we're talking. And it does have a very clever core mechanic, and that is the way you're placing down the cards and firing off a line, be it a column or a row. And there's a lot of flexibility in that, and I think it's very clever. It is not something that I've seen before, and I really enjoy it. It's a little more kind of towards the Euro end of dungeon crawlers, so there's a lot of dice chucking, so don't imagine this is like a Euro, but the way that puzzle works, it has a little bit of a Euro vibe to it, and I think it works really well. But along with that, because those lines are going to clear every time you do a complete line, it actually lets you sometimes kind of shoot yourself in the foot because like, oh no, I'm going to hold on to have this really big play, and you kind of hoping you can time it out perfectly and how the AI is going to work like you want. And I do think it's just exceedingly clever. I like the way the shield works. It's very simple, but it feels very powerful. You really do feel far more heroic than these bad guys, even as you're getting wailed on. You're like, oh, I'm fine, this is fine. But I think it all does work really well. It's a very clever mechanic, and it is, as far as I can think of, pretty unique. So that is always a bonus for me. The next thing I'll say is the way the character growth works is pretty good. It's pretty simple, and I like that it's simple to kind of track what's going on. And you feel like you have some agency. This isn't one of those games where you have complete power to kind of do whatever you want, nor is it one of those games where you're completely basing your growth on loot. It is still skill-based, but depending on which path you're going up, that's going to kind of determine what it is that you get. And you also have a little bit of power over your growth because, well, if you complete missions faster, you get more bonuses. If you complete certain quests, your little individual quests, you get other kinds of bonuses. And so I think that works really well. The last thing that I want to highlight here is the AI is very easy to operate. You know what you're looking at. The cards, it's very quick to read them. You know what's going to happen if it's a mutant, if it's not a mutant. And at least in what I have played so far, I have not finished the campaign. But you're never saddled with a ton of bad guys to manage and operate. There might be a lot of minions on the board, but it'll only be a couple of types of minions. So it's just very simple. Flip this card, you know what they're going to be doing, and you kind of manage yourself around that. And I think that works really, really well. So what are my quibbles with the game? Now, even though I said I think the production is great, and I do, I have two little quibbles. One, the insert is just kind of it's just got wells. And I hesitate to say this, but because I talked about how nice all these bits are, I know that people are thinking, it's got the game tree system in there, and it has all the things, a perfect spot for everything. This is not one of those. There is, to be clear, there is plenty of damn space in that box for everything that comes with it. You're not going to fit the minis in that box. If you have the minis, there's plenty of space, but it's not some game tray system. And often when I talk about such an amazing production from a crowdfunding game, you're thinking, oh, special insert. This is not that. My only real quibble for me personally with the production is the initiative tokens. And that is these guys. See how small that is? There we go. They're super tiny, and some of them I actually had a hard time figuring out which one matches which bad guy. They're just too small. Now, I have terrible eyes, but here's the thing. Because I've always had terrible eyes, I've had glasses since kindergarten, I am like super legally blind if I don't have my glasses on. This isn't a thing of, oh, I'm getting older and have old eyes. No, my eyes have always been bad. These things are always on, no matter where I'm looking. So when I'm like, I'm having a hard time seeing this is not old man brown. This is, I think these things are too small because sometimes you can't see them. Now, to be clear, once you get them out there on the board, it's pretty obvious. But as I was flipping through, I was looking for they're not called sea rats, but that's what's sticking in my head, the little sea rats. I was like, which one is it? I don't know. Looking through. So that's my only quibble with the actual production of the game. I wish these were a little bit bigger, or I don't know, maybe on the back it said what they were, or something like that. The next thing I'm going to say is something that I think people are either going to be really into or not. And that is the little individual quests that you're doing during each game. And they remind me of the Gloomhaven scenario quest that you get. Of it's okay, I need to do the specific thing so I make sure I get the experience. Because you really want to get that experience, because you really want to get that level up. But it sometimes means you find yourself doing stuff that isn't necessarily the smartest. And, I guess that just comes down to the type of player you are. It's like, well, it's okay if I don't get the experience because I'm gonna do this thing instead. But it does have those significant advancement bonuses from those little quests that you get, and sometimes they just feel like this feels weird. This doesn't feel like this makes sense that I'm doing this right now. The next thing I'm going to say is the story is a take it or leave it kind of thing. I won't lie. The first story bit that I read, or maybe one of the first two, and to be clear, it's a well-written story. It's not poorly written or anything like that, but I was definitely a little bit like, say what now? What is happening? We're unfolding? What's unfolding? There's my quantum this and my that and my. It took me a little while before I was like, okay, all right, I'm with you. I'm with you here. And to be fair, had I played Tidal Blades 1, maybe I wouldn't feel this way and I'd know exactly what's going on. But it definitely just drops you into the story, and you kind of got to pick things up as you go. But that said, it's, as far as dungeon crawls go, it is light years ahead, story-wise, of a lot of dungeon crawls that I played before. It has a coherent, cohesive story that you can start to get invested in. And the only other thing that I'm going to bring up is the core dice mechanic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to boil this down to, are you an old school dungeon crawl type person, or are you a new school dungeon crawl type person? Because I think of games like Kinfire Chronicles or Tales from the Red Dragon Inn, where you're always going to do something with your attacks. Always. Maybe they won't be as good as you want them to be. Maybe you have ways that you can boost the damage. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're going to chuck those dice and hope they explode. Or you have something that is like the old school dungeon crawls, where, you know what, maybe you just miss. And maybe you just whiff again. And that's closer to what you have in this game. There aren't a ton of just, you have no chance to do any damage on the dice, but there definitely are sides to the dice to where if you don't have the resource to spend to make sure that the symbols on the dice turn into hits, then sometimes you just wind up doing nothing. And to be clear, I'm only putting this in the quibble section because it feels like a divisive topic, because sometimes people are like, well, if you're always hitting all the time, then, well, that's dumb, that's not fun. Well, other people are like, it really stinks if I'm waiting for my turn, there's a 4-person game, comes all the way around to me, I chuck all my dice and I do nothing. You know, 6 one way, half a dozen another. I tend to play most of these games at 1 or 2 players, so I got plenty of action. But it is just something to make sure that you are clocking, because as you're doing all these cool things, you're chaining together multiple attacks. If you don't have the focus or the spirit, then you just might not be able to do what it is that you want. Again, I feel like this is a very quibbly quibble, and it's not a bad thing. Just understand that that is what it is, because, boy, if you want to get dungeon crawl nerds like me going, you talk about, should you ever be able to just miss, or should you always do something, blah, blah, blah. The arguments can go on forever. But there you have it, folks. Overall, I was pretty pleased with this game, and I think I'm probably downplaying a little bit. I think it's a cool game. I'd actually heard that it was really fun from Michael Kelly over at One Stop Co-op Shop, and so I was excited to try it. I really enjoy the way it's set up. I love that it's relatively small. There's a lot of stuff, but relatively small. I like the map books. I think there's some brilliant production stuff going on. The core puzzle's really neat, and to me, it's in that same zone with Tales from the Red Dragon and Kinfire Chronicles, Wander, Cult of Barnacle Bay, and the Clux Revenge that's coming, as just kind of a slightly heavier than the beer and pretzels game, because you got some pretty chunky story and you get to make some pretty interesting decisions as you're going through. So there you have it, folks. That is Tidal Blades 2: Rise of the Unfolders, the unfolding and the refolding. Perhaps it's about laundry, I'm not quite sure. But this is one of those ones that I think if you are really into dungeon crawls, that medium lightweight range of the dungeon crawls, you kind of like the kind of cartoony aspect of the world, and you're looking for a combat system that is a little bit more puzzly than just chucking some dice, no matter how interesting the dice are, then this is one that I think you should probably check out. So there you have it, folks. As always, if I made any mistakes in the rules overview, please let me know in the comments with a timestamp so I can get that in the Klingon subtitles. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, and maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.